Hello guys, welcome back. This is David. Today again we are going to talk more about programming fundamentals, specifically on functions related topics. So the first question that we may ask is, what is a function? Function is a concept that is used very commonly in math, where some of you may have learned similar definition like this. So function is like a box, and you may give it inputs, and it will return to you with some outputs. You may or may not know what exactly are inside of the box, meaning that you may know what exactly the function does to the inputs in order to give you back the outputs, or you are simply using the function as a black box to provide you the output. In the programming perspective, a function is a procedure stored under a name that can be used as often as needed by calling the name. So the name is like the function box. We use functions in programming by simply calling the name of that function. The action is called a function call. So each of the functions in most programming languages can have 0 to multiple inputs, which are also often called arguments or parameters. Each function can also only has one output, which can contain multiple values as a collection. In Python, the way that we define functions is to use def, the term def. We simply put the name that we want to define a function after def. We'll be able to see that in the later part of the video. So the return statements are the way that functions give you back the output. Whenever the program runs into a return statement, it exits from the function and gives back the return value to where it was called. There is also the case that a function doesn't have return value, or it returns nothing. In that case, the function returns none. None is a concept that is very commonly used in many programming languages to represent the concept of nothing. And each function can have multiple return statements in different place of the function, but only one would get executed each time when you call the function, because whenever the program runs into a return statement, it would exit from the functions. It would exit from the function and then give you back the value directly. It wouldn't run into any of other return statements inside of the function. The return statements is a different concept from print. So after we learned the idea of function, basically print is a Python function. You give whatever you want to print as an input to the print function, and the print doesn't return anything. It simply does one thing. It shows the thing that you want to print on your screen. Instead, a return statement is to give you back the output to wherever it was called. Function also introduced the concept of scope, which is the visibility of variables, representing which part of the program can see or use them. We have kind of encountered this case related to scope, where we can use a variable or to access its value after it is defined and assigned. We can't really use it before it was defined and assigned. So the scope of that variable is only after its assignment. And in the case of function, it creates a local scope. So variables defined inside the functions can only be seen and used inside of that function. Meaning that if I have a statement that is like x equals 5, I wouldn't be able to access that x or its value outside of the function. So if I do a print x outside of the function, I have no idea. The program would crash because it doesn't know what x is at all. But there's also a concept of global variables, which are variables outside of the functions, basically. It can be seen and used inside of the functions too. So if you define x equals 5 before that function, you will be able to use that value and that x inside of function as well. And you would also be able to use that x and 5 after the function too. So let's see some examples in Python. So first, we're going to write a really simple Python function. What the function does is to take an integer as input and doubles the value and return it. So the way that we are going to write it is to write def with space after that, and then right after it we can write the function name. I'm going to call the function double because that's what the function does. And within the parentheses, we need to put the parameters. We can put no parameters inside, or we can put several parameters separated by comma. But in this case, there's only one parameter, so I'm going to write x. You can name it whatever you want, like variables. You can name it like y or num or x0, but in this case, I'm just gonna keep it x for simplicity. And then we need to write colon to tell Python that I'm done writing the defining the function name, and I'm starting to writing the procedure within the function. You can see there's an indentation right over there automatically, because that's the way that Python knows which part of the program is inside of the function that you defined. So we can write x equals 5 and y equals 4 and return 0. They're all inside of the function. And we can also write print even with spacing, and that's also part of the function as well. But if we write something like that without the indentation, print 5, it is not inside of the function anymore. So that would be executed outside the function instead of being included inside of the procedure of the function. So let's write the actual function. The most simple way to do it is to simply do return with the value that you want to return. So the value that we want to return is double the value of x, which we can do by 2 times x. That is how you write a return statement. You write return and then an expression or a value right after it. But how do we call the function? We can simply call the function name, like double, and then provide it with a parameter. Then in this case, I'm going to give it 4, and then it should return me with an 8. Let's try and execute it. So it was executed, but nothing was shown on the screen. That's because the function returns the value, but we didn't tell the program what we are going to do with the value. If we want to display it onto the screen, we need to wrap it with a print function to tell the program that we want to execute the function with a parameter of 4, and then after it returns, we want to print the return value of that function. And then we can try to execute it again. In this case, it returns 8, so exactly as we expected. We can try functions with no parameters or many parameters. We can call the function func. In this case, I'm not going to give it any parameters. I'm going to let it print no parameter inside of the function and then return 0. Then I will call the function. Let's try and execute it. So no parameters are being printed on the screen because when I execute the function, I go into the function, I execute the print, and then I execute the return 0. So the print was being executed inside of function. So that line is shown on the screen. But I don't see a 0 anywhere. It's the same as we did last time. In order to us to see the return value, we need to wrap it with a print, and then it will be displayed on the screen. See, no parameters and 0. And then we can also try to write a function which takes several parameters, x, y, and z. What I'm gonna do is to, again, print first several parameters. I'm going to let it print, I'm going to let it return x plus y plus z. In this case, it's going to return the sum of all three parameters. Remember, if we wanted to show the return value, we have to wrap it with a print. I'm going to call func 1, 2, and 3. The parameters have to match in function calls, and then we can execute it. It prints several parameters first, and then returns the sum of it, and then prints the value of that sum. So that's 6, as we expected. You may want to ask, what if we didn't provide enough parameters with the function? In that case, it's gonna raise an error because we didn't provide a value for z. The function doesn't know what to do with it. And then we can try different things with return values. As we talked about earlier, the return statement terminates the program and then gives back the output of the function. So if we print something right after return statement, like hello, it shouldn't be printed because the program would stop, the function would stop right after this and then goes back to where we called them. I need to put 3 back to eliminate the error. In this case, the hello is not printed simply because it's after the return statement. And there's also the case that there are many return statements like we talked about earlier. I can return 0 right here. It wouldn't return 0 because we execute this line first, and then the program exit from the function goes back here. So this line never gets executed either. We can try that. It gives us the same result, several parameters at 6, because this line was not executed. So there's also the case that there's no return statement. We can try that with this function as well. In this case, as we talk about, the function would return a value none, which means nothing. Because we didn't really return anything back. In this case, when we print the value of the return, it would give us none. Because if we didn't return anything within the function automatically returns none. Or we can try return without any expressions or values after it. It gives us none as well. This has the same behavior as not returning. And then we can try how scope works within a function. So let's write the sum back, x plus y plus z. What I'm going to do here is to add an a. I'm going to give a value of 4 to it. I'm going to add a after x, y, and z. So basically what the function does now is to find the sum of x, y, and z and plus 4. I'm going to run it. It should give us 10 because 1 plus 2 plus 3 equals plus 4 equals 10. And then I might also want to access a, the value of 4, outside of the function. I might want to see what exactly is in a. But the program would fail because the scope of a is within the function. So when I'm outside the function, it doesn't know what a is or the value inside of a. But instead, we can write something like that. We can write b equals 5. That is a global variable. I'm going to write b after that. Unlike a variable that's defined inside a function, when you are defining a variable and assigning a value to it outside of the function, it is a global variable. So the scope of that variable is all of the program right after the definition. So it should execute correctly and return as a result. Yeah, in this case, it returns 15 because we are doing 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, which is the correct result. And then functions can actually call other functions. You don't have to make function calls outside of the function. You can do something like, you can use this function to do something else. For example, I can write something like double sum, which takes 3 parameters as well, x, y, and z. Notice the parameters name can be the same for 2 different functions because they are not in the same scope. So what I'm going to do is to call the function above x, y, z, and times 2. So basically, I'm doing whatever is inside of that function and then times 2 to that value. I'm going to try to call the function double sum and see what it gives us. 1, 2, and 3 for the same values. Execute it. Oh, I called a function that is not defined. The function I named was double sum. So I got 30. I got 15 earlier, and now I times 2. It gives us 30. So in this case, you don't have to write everything within a function or everything you want within a function. You can use the other functions that you wrote previously. So what we learned today are things related to functions. We learned how to define function. We learned function calls. We can have functions with different number of parameters. We can have function with no return statement or no return values. And then we learned the variable scopes inside and outside of the function. Also, we learned we can call functions from other functions. Again, I'm going to post notes under the video. Please check them out and leave comments about the video or about the notes. Thank you very much.